right, Buffalo Bills fans, welcome to this episode of the Walkthrough, part of the Overreaction Sports Network. I'm your host, Anthony Marino. Happy to be here with you once again. And of course, our show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Bye-week blues for the Buffalo Bills and for all of our fans across Bills Mafia. It's been a little bit of a tough stretch, and I will be honest with you guys. I wasn't sure if I was going to do a show this week. You know, I don't like to take a week off, even if it's the bye, but I find myself a bit frustrated this week, and I'm still frustrated, right? The Bills with their second loss in a row, losing on Monday Night Football to the Atlanta Falcons. I'm recording this on Sunday morning for those of you that are listening on the audio side of things, and usually I'm not one to be this frustrated this many days after a loss, right? I'm usually that kind of like, get back up on your horse, dust off, you're good to go. It's one game, it's a long season, no big deal. You can move on from this. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do the show this week, because, you know, when you find yourself in this position, for me, that's a little bit different. And if you've, listened to my shows in years past when I would be on Buffalo Rumblings doing my show there, I think you knew I was always a pretty relatively optimistic guy, even when I was on doing guest spots on Talking Buffalo with Pat Moran. And those of you that maybe you've just found me as I've joined the Overreaction Sports Network over these past couple of months, I'm usually not one that gets too down after a loss, but this one is sticking with me. And I'm curious if it's sticking with you too, because, you can look at things in the past, and I think sometimes, you try to analyze and think to yourself, why am I feeling this way? Why is this one sticking with me? That's a little bit different. And, I kind of go into that just a little bit because I don't know, maybe it has something more tied to the offense and them having some serious struggles on Monday Night Football, where in the past, sometimes you have those bad losses and you point to the defense and you've gotten a little bit more accustomed to that. But when it comes to the offense and only putting up 14 points, that's not something that we see too often. So I'm going to get into a couple of things with you today. This is not going to be the longest podcast. I will be honest, I got to get some things off my chest. I think that might help me kind of as you move forward to the next matchup when the Buffalo Bills will take on the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. And as I said before, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, the early lines for that game, the Bills are a 7.5-point favorite, even though they are on the road, and the Panthers certainly showing signs of improvement as a franchise. The over-under at 47.5. And again, that's coming to you from our friends at FanDuel. So we'll monitor that leading into next week's show too, see what type of movement there is on that line, because that kind of gives you an idea, right, of where everyone's head is at as it relates to the Bills. And right now, sentiment is kind of low when it comes to Buffalo. And again, for the Carolina Panthers, the arrow is pointing up. We talked before about their 30-0 win over the Atlanta Falcons, a victory over the Dallas Cowboys last week. So they're kind of feeling pretty good right now, and we'll see what happens when they take on the Bills after the bye. One more thing I need to get to. I need to thank our friends from Anchor Bar. Now, you all know Anchor Bar is home of the original Buffalo chicken wing. It's the place to watch the Buffalo Bills and all your favorite sports teams. You can go to anchorbar.com to see all the locations and get info for online ordering. Anchor Bar original Buffalo wings are fresh, never frozen, jumbo, high-quality wings. You guys know that. They're deep fried and sauced to your liking. And listen, they've got over 24 different varieties that you can choose from. Maybe you're not feeling wings that day. I mean, listen, if I'm going to Anchor Bar, I'm getting wings. But all their locations have a wide variety of choices. They've got appetizers, boneless wings, tenders, pizza, beef on wick, burgers, sandwiches, kind of you name it, they've got it. So currently, Anchor Bar has 16 locations with 3 new ones opening in the fall in Tucson, Arizona, Frisco, Texas, and Raleigh, North Carolina. And as I do say every week, anyone from Anchor Bar, if you are listening, we need one here in Albany, New York also. So thank you again for that support. So listen, let me kind of talk to you just a little bit about the Bills. And as I said, I feel like this might be a little bit cathartic for me, a little bit out of character, but just I think when you take a look at the team, there's a couple of glaring issues. And I think the glaring issues that stand out, at least to me, where they become a little bit more frustrating, is because they're glaring issues that many of us had talked about throughout free agency and throughout the draft process. The first one is wide receiver. And it's interesting because so much conversation around wide receiver. If you're a listener to Jeremy and Joe on WGR 550 AM, you're very familiar with the wide receiver train. Of course, then you're probably also familiar with Brandon Beane and his appearance after the draft this year when he kind of went off on the two co-hosts about them talking about the need for help at wide receiver for the Bills. Over this past week, really over this past 2 weeks, it's been a bit of a common theme. And it started with that Patriots game, I think in many ways, because you get torched by Stephon Diggs, right? Your former wide receiver one, he comes back to Buffalo, puts on an absolute show, making some phenomenal catches, kind of reminding everybody, listen, everybody eats might be one mantra that you live by in kind of this collection of pass catching options. But this is what it looks like to have the guy, right? When you need a catch, when you need someone to make a big play, you have someone that you can go to and you know that he is going to deliver. And it brought back some of those fond memories of Diggs when he was with the Bills, but more where things are today, right? Kind of a reminder of, hey, the Bills don't have this guy. They have some very nice options. They have some guys that you've seen flashes from. You've got some consistency from Khalil Shakir. It looks like some growing consistency from Dalton Kincaid, but you still don't have that guy. And then you go to the game against the Falcons, and right, the term is just separation, the lack of separation for the Bills over and over and over again. You've heard Jerry Ostrowski say, like, he's even muted the term separation on social media so he doesn't have to, kind of be bombarded with that anymore. And I think it becomes an interesting rallying cry for fans, like, even myself. You can talk about, a lack of separation, like, what exactly does that even mean, right? It becomes a bit of a buzzword that is out there. And for me, it's less about talking about separation and more talking about just the lack of talent that the Bills have. And it is going to become a little bit critical of Brandon Beane, not a little bit. It's going to become critical of Brandon Beane, not because he went on the rant on WGR back after the draft. And I'll be honest, at the time, I definitely did not love that. I did not love that look from the general manager of your team, kind of that defensiveness, but whatever, it's his right. He wants to do that. He's making an appearance. He doesn't like something that they're saying. He wants to, kind of clap back in that way. That's fine. More with it was almost after that, how the team sort of dug into it, and Beane kind of dug into it, even going on, the Pat McAfee show and some of those things. That, you double down in this type of scenario, then things get a little bit tough. And I say that because if it doesn't work, then that's on you. And now, Brandon Beane, leading up to the trade deadline, you find yourself in a bit of a predicament. You're either going to stand pat and say, no, I believe in this. I'm going to dig in and I like what we have. This is what we need, and we don't need to be better at wide receiver. Or you're going to eat a little crow. Maybe you're going to look to make a trade again, like you did last year, a third-round pick for Amari Cooper that was certainly excited about at the time, right? So I can't be critical when I was excited at the time and maybe it didn't pan out. But if I was excited at the time for the move, then that has to be okay. But for him, it's like, what is he going to do? Because I think when you look at this group, you can say to yourself, it's probably it's not good enough. You've got some guys that can make some plays, but maybe not as consistently as you need to. And I think there's a bigger conversation to have around everybody eats too, because I think when you talk about everybody eats, it shouldn't be on this, like, every week the targets are scattered amongst everybody. I think it's like each week you're going to look at where you have a mismatch and you're going to look to take advantage of it. And maybe at the end of the season, when you look at your target distribution, you'll say, wow, there's a lot of parity here. You've got Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman and Josh Palmer, and all these names that, these guys all have around 100 targets dispersed around them. I think that's fine when you talk about the end of the season. But during an individual game, if you have a matchup that you can take advantage of, I don't want it where you're just smattering it around for the sake of doing that. And that comes back more to the Patriots game for me, because it was like Dalton Kincaid was that matchup. 6 out of 6 targets, 6 receptions, 112 yards. And it was just like, why is the team not continuing to go back to him? And from those that analyzed the film and the tape, it seemed like that was a situation that the Bills could have taken advantage of more, that they did not. So, where I go with some of this too, and again, back to the comments from Bean, around Josh Palmer. And listen, he got hurt in the game the other night, off to a great start, starts the game on the offensive side of the ball with a 47-yard reception, right? So things looking up there. But I just think maybe it's that philosophy on what it is to invest in the wide receiver position. And, when you're signing a Curtis Samuel and a Josh Palmer, and they're in that $8 to $9 million a year range, that's not a hefty investment in the wide receiver position, right? When your top wide receivers in football are making $40 million a year, and I'm not saying that's what you're going to go and spend, but don't look at it and say, well, we spent $10 million on a guy. Like, shouldn't you be happy? Like, yeah, no. And let me give you a little bit of an example and some context with this. Back in 2019, the Bills made an investment in wide receiver. They signed John Brown and Cole Beasley to the team as free agents, both in the neighborhood of that $9 to $10 million per year range. And, you can say, well, that's the same of what they're, paying for Josh Palmer and what they're paying for Curtis Samuel. But back in 2019, the NFL salary cap was like $188 million. Today, it's almost $280 million. So that $10 million is not created equal when you're talking about an investment that you're making. Now, I also get it. Back then, you had Josh Allen on a rookie contract. He certainly is not at this time. Maybe you had more money to play with. But when you talk about making that type of an investment, I don't know that they've done enough, right? And if you're going to look at things and say, well, gosh, instead of signing 2 guys at $8, $9, $10 million and Elijah Moore at $5 million, like maybe invest some of those draft picks into some guys that you can try to develop, see if you get another Gabe Davis or Khalil Shakir that can grow with the franchise over the time, and package the Elijah Moore money and the Josh Palmer money and the Curtis Samuel money, and maybe get somebody more in the neighborhood of 20 to 25, or, play around with the salary cap and bring someone with a little bit more, of a pedigree into the mix than just some guys that have been average at best. And again, being an average NFL player, like, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't look at the Josh Palmer contract and say, oh, this guy is overpaid or anything like that, or Curtis Samuel along the same lines. But, when you're paying someone as I'm trying to think, they might be like around number 40, right? Like 38th, highest average contract in the NFL. Like, you're kind of getting what you pay for, and you're not paying a lot with those contracts. So that's the part where, I don't think you can sit there and kind of pound the table and say, we signed Josh Palmer. Like, okay, that's not a significant investment in what you've done. And if you're not investing in young talent through the draft that you can develop, which you've had success with in the past, when you look at a Gabe Davis and a Khalil Shakir, right? I mean, those are 2 guys that you can say, hey, you invest a 4th and a 5th round pick. Look at what they can become. Look at what we can develop them into. More of those opportunities, and maybe less of what's going in right now, where you've got a lot of guys kind of in that middling type of range. And, I know there's been some frustration with Keon Coleman. He's still young. I'm not there yet, but certainly right now, when you look at some of the other guys that were drafted around him, yeah, it's going to have you shake your head a little bit. Again, we've seen enough of the flashes that have been good. That he can make the plays. So I'm not going to rush to any judgment when it comes to Keon Coleman. But I am certainly looking for him to bounce back after a couple of disappointing performances, again, being benched for the beginning of the game a couple of weeks ago. And for that to be the second time that's happened over these past 2 years, you just don't love to see it. So, there's that side of things when it comes to wide receiver. On the flip side, it's at safety too. And there was a lot of conversation around the draft and a lot of buzz late that, hey, the Buffalo Bills were going to be in a position where they might take a first round safety. And a lot of mock drafts having them going safety in round 1 or round 2, and thinking to yourself, like, I don't know if Tyler Rapp is the guy. I don't know if Cole Bishop is going to develop. Safety has been such the cornerstone of the Bills defense in the early years for Sean McDermott, with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, and, two fantastic players and what they meant to the franchise. Certainly just like you think back with fond memories when it comes to those two. Now you hear more and more conversation around safety. Benjamin Solak from ESPN comes out. It's just like, if there's any team that is going to do something, the Buffalo Bills need to do something at safety. I'm paraphrasing, but if you've seen the tweet, you know what I'm talking about. And, in so many of these losses where the Bills are giving up these big plays, people that are smarter than me, right? People that can analyze the film and understand what's taking place and where the Bills need to be better, it keeps coming back to the safety position. And that is tough, right? That is a tough pill to swallow, because you look at things right now and you're just thinking to yourself, like, okay, I don't think that the Bills can make a trade for a safety and someone can come in and replace one of these two starters, at least from the intricacies of the position, the understanding the defense, everything that goes into it. That is not something that is just going to happen. So when you talk about trades that the Bills can make, and people will talk about cornerback too, and potentially a need there, do you need to do something at defensive tackle, depending on Daquan Jones and the injury that's there? But safety is one of those positions that there was plenty of conversation around in the offseason, and now that's continuing. And here we are coming through 6 games. Again, sitting at 4-2, the sky is not falling. There's plenty of football ahead of you. But it seems like there has been a regression when it comes to the play of Tyler Rapp, and that part has been tough. Tackling has been an issue for him and Bishop. You hear a lot of conversation around some bad angles, and just that part has been difficult. And, when you go back to Brandon Beane and you talk about the situation where the Bills are with the salary cap, and, you can hand out a lot of those mid-tier type of contracts that we discussed before. Well, now you come in, you've got some guys that are aging on your roster, right? So you look at some things and you're thinking to yourself, like, gosh, they might have to invest a pick at wide receiver. Well, they're going to have to invest a pick at linebacker. That's what I meant to say first. Safety might need an overhaul. Like, what's going to happen at center with Connor McGovern? What's going to happen at guard? And when you look at David Edwards and him leaving, and, Osiris Torrance coming into a contract year, there's a lot of question marks for the Bills and the roster heading into next season. Yes, I'm definitely getting ahead of myself, but it just the part where you can be frustrated, where it's like, all right, probably those 2 areas that really stood out to folks were wide receiver and safety, and they might be the 2 areas that the Bills did the least in when it came to that time. And you just think to yourself, like, okay, I don't claim to be smarter than Brandon Beane or anyone on his staff. There's a lot of people out there that identified those as the 2 positions that had the biggest question mark, and those are the 2 areas where the Bills, you could argue, maybe did a little bit of the least. So that part becomes difficult. And it becomes difficult too, because these last 2 drafts for the Bills, you have not seen a ton of production yet. And with young players, that it takes some time, right? You try not to rush to any judgment. I'm never going to clarify someone a bust after 1 year, let alone 6 weeks, not even for a second. Like, I'm never going to go down that road. But the 2024 draft, it's been some tough sledding so far, right? Keon Coleman, we talked about a little bit before. Cole Bishop, we just discussed. Dwayne Carter on the injured reserve, out for the season. But there was even conversation throughout training camp, is there going to be a roster spot for him based on the other investments that the team made at defensive tackle? Ray Davis has been slow to get going so far this season. And, when you look at your top 4 picks and not much taking place there yet, okay, that's a little bit tough. Fast forward to the 2025 draft, again, way too early. Of course, injury to Maxwell Harrison puts the Bills in a tough position, right? And no timeline yet for when he might be coming back. Certainly hope that he can get healthy and, work his way back to recovery sooner rather than later. DJ Sanders gets hurt after a very mixed start to the season for him. And then you can look at things when you talk about the 3rd round pick, Landon Jackson. I mean, again, a guy I was really excited about when the Bills took him, but struggling to even get a jersey on game day and playing limited snaps to say the least, and showing that this might be a project that takes some more time. The one bright spot, defensive tackle Deion Walker, which was probably a pick that got the most scrutiny for the Bills because it was a double dip at defensive tackle. They had signed Larry Ogunjobi, again, utilizing draft resources in a position that you had already dedicated some resources. But he has been the one rookie bright spot for the Bills so far. But again, I say this, when you're in essence not getting much from 2 classes of rookies, then the light kind of shines a little bit brighter on some of those areas where you've had some of those deficiencies, where you've had some struggles a little bit. And that's where you find yourself sitting at 4-2. Again, I'm a little bit more frustrated than I probably should be. I'm definitely more frustrated than I should be a week after a loss. And maybe it's just because it is the bye week and there's not another game to look forward to in the immediate future. So it's not just like, all right, when the Bills lost to the Patriots, okay, God, that sucked. I hated to see that happen. Got the Atlanta Falcons coming up in a few days. Like, dust off, let's go, ready to go with this. With the Falcons, not so much. And, and with that game with the Falcons too, right, it was just, both sides of the ball looked bad. Yes, defense was so much better in the second half. I don't want to take anything away from them there. But on the flip side, they were so awful in the first half. It was mind-numbing, mind-boggling, whatever term you want to use. That's what the Bills' defense was. And the offense just, I don't know if they were just overthinking themselves or what it was. But when both of those pieces aren't working, it gets a little frustrating. So now here we are, a week out from the Bills playing the Carolina Panthers. As I said, FanDuel has the line at the Bills as 7.5-point favorite right now. Over-under at 47.5. Kind of monitor that, see how it looks this week leading up. I know it's a little bit more of a negative show for me, and I don't like to do that, but I felt like it was helpful for me to just get this out. Now I feel like I can move on, enjoy some football for the rest of the weekend. Hopefully that you can too, as we look forward to the Bills playing the Carolina Panthers. And I'll be back with you next week. But listen, you don't have to wait until next week. The Overreaction Sports Network, like, we're here. We've got you covered. Great shows for you each and every day. So make sure you're checking out Joe Miller, John Fina, Jerry Ostrowski. Zig Fracassi has joined the team. Dan Frederick doing the Mafia Bets show now. We've got you covered throughout the week. And I'm having a lot of fun. I hope that you're having a lot of fun tuning in too. I know it's more fun when the Bills are winning. And let's see them get back on track against the Carolina Panthers next weekend. I'm going to get out of here for now. I always appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you comment, like, subscribe, share the show whenever you can. All right. I'm really going to leave. Thanks, you guys, again. Go Bills, and I'll talk to y'all soon.